Imagine an environment where economic agents must constantly choose between two completely different reward structures. On one side is a piece rate payout, a guaranteed fixed return for specific effort. On the other side is a tournament, a zero-sum competition, where the winner takes a massive premium and the losers get absolutely nothing. The math governing this choice seems straightforward, but it is complicated by a severe information deficit. The agent knows their own baseline capability, but the underlying ability distribution of their opponents remains completely unobservable. To navigate this, organizations and platforms often inject a specific intervention. They provide social information. They reveal exact data showing how many peers have already chosen to enter the tournament pool. This introduces a precise behavioral question. When agents see the aggregated decisions of their peers, how does that data alter their own willingness to compete? Incentive structures succeed or fail based on how accurately they predict these human responses. Misjudging whether a pool of candidates will follow a crowd or strategically avoid one dictates the effectiveness of every recruitment and promotion strategy. Economists categorize the potential reactions to this peer data into three distinct mechanisms. The first is social conformity. Often referred to as social learning, this theory suggests that agents default to behavioral contagion. If the data shows a high entry rate, they follow the herd and compete. If it shows a low entry rate, they retreat. The second mechanism is cognitive salience. Under this theory, the human brain allocates limited cognitive resources to whatever is most prominent. Simply providing a data point about the tournament option makes that option highly noticeable, bypassing deeper strategic calculation and artificially boosting entry rates. The third mechanism is strategic adjustment. This argues that agents operate as rational Bayesians. They do not blindly copy their peers. Rather, they use the peer data to actively update their internal mathematical models regarding the overall strength of the competitor pool. The tension here lies in the conflicting predictions of conformity and strategy. The conformity model assumes humans will seek safety in numbers and mimic the majority. The strategic model assumes human beings will actively exploit the absence of the herd to maximize their own expected value. A 2026 paper by Banerjee, Gangadharan, Kumar, and Murali provides the framework to test these competing theories. Their research specifically targets the mechanisms driving competitive entry, focusing on whether individuals conform to social signals or respond with Bayesian logic. To isolate the truth, they constructed an experimental architecture designed to strip away cognitive biases, neutralize external pressures, and observe pure strategic intent in an isolated environment. This animation illustrates the baseline performance measurement used in the study. Participants face a real effort task where they scan two 3x3 matrices, identify the smallest numbers in each, and calculate the sum. They complete as many sequences as possible within a strict 90-second window. The experiment begins by forcing exposure to both payment environments. In Task 1, participants solve the matrices under a strict piece rate condition, earning 25 rupees per correct answer. In Task 2, they repeat the process under a forced tournament condition, where the highest scorer in a group of 4 takes 100 rupees per correct answer, and the rest receive 0. Moving into Task 3, subjects make their first independent choice between the piece rate and the tournament. At this stage, they are entirely isolated from any data regarding their peers' choices, establishing a clean, uncontaminated baseline of their individual competitiveness. Instead of moving immediately to a second decision round, the researchers inject two specific filler phases. Task 4 evaluates willingness to cooperate through a public goods game, and Task 5 measures baseline risk preferences using a standardized lottery mechanic. These are cognitive buffers. Placing them between the competition choices prevents a demand effect. Without this temporal separation, participants might attempt to decipher the researcher's intent and artificially alter their subsequent choices to perform correctly for the study. Finally, the subjects arrive at Task 6. This is the crucial endline decision, where participants again choose their payment structure, but only after being exposed to the study's precise treatment variables. By structurally separating the baseline and endline decisions, the architecture ensures that any shift in behavior during Task 6 is a genuine, calculated response to new data. The researchers mathematically mapped rational behavior. An expected payoff relies on mu, a beta distribution representing prior belief about total competition. Because high-ability individuals have a higher probability of winning, they maintain a higher cutoff belief, willing to compete even when expecting heavy competition. This establishes a critical proxy. If high-ability agents are the most likely to compete, then a high total entry rate signals a highly skilled opponent pool. Conversely, a low total entry rate signals a weaker pool. This visualization maps the Bayesian updating process. When an agent receives data showing actual competition is lower than their prior belief, they shift their internal beta distribution toward a lower expected entry rate. As expected competition drops, their subjective probability of winning mathematically rises. The agent infers that the active competitor pool is weak. The calculated expected payoff of the tournament now outweighs the guaranteed piece rate, driving the agent to enter the competition. This creates a direct behavioral trap. If the strategic adjustment hypothesis is accurate, feeding data that shows a low peer entry rate will not cause them to retreat. It will paradoxically cause a sharp spike in competitive entry. To test this, the cohort was divided into 3 blind treatment arms during Task 6: the control group, the average group, and the random group. Participants assigned to the average treatment were given aggregate social data. The prompt explicitly stated the exact percentage of subjects in the session who chose the tournament in the baseline round. The behavioral response to this prompt was stark. When it revealed a low entry rate, specifically below 40%, subjects actively updated their beliefs, abandoned the safe piece rate, and chose the tournament. This data directly invalidates the social conformity hypothesis. The agent saw that the majority of their peers avoided the tournament, and instead of copying them, they used that absence as an opportunity to attack. However, there is one remaining variable to consider. By explicitly mentioning the tournament in the prompt, the text itself made the competitive option cognitively prominent. Did the agents process the aggregate math, or did the mere mention of the tournament trigger a salience effect? To control for this, the random treatment delivered the exact same sentence structure, preserving the cognitive prompt, but removed the aggregate data. Participants were simply told the choice made by one single randomly selected peer. The result was flat. The random treatment produced 0 statistically significant effect on competitive entry. Without aggregate data to calculate, the cognitive prominence of the word tournament did nothing to alter behavior. The salience hypothesis failed. By neutralizing the cognitive trigger and removing the conformity bias, the experiment proves that strategic adjustment is the definitive driver of choice. The agents required actionable math, and when they got it, they optimized. This diagram outlines the final structural reality. The psychological assumptions of social mimicking and cognitive prompting terminate without yielding behavioral change. Only the strategic path, processing a low signal as evidence of a weaker pool, successfully predicts the increase in entry. A low competitor count is not processed as a social norm to emulate. It is processed mathematically, as a structural vulnerability ready to be exploited by a rational actor. Furthermore, the human brain enforces strict data requirements before executing this logic. Anecdotal data regarding a single peer is discarded. The Bayesian update only triggers when a statistically significant aggregate signal is provided. The researchers observed this consistent extraction of value within a cohort of high-achieving MBA students, suggesting that strategic Bayesian logic is a core component of how competitive individuals process information. Competitiveness, in this context, is entirely immune to simple cognitive nudges. If the underlying data does not reveal an expected mathematical advantage, the rational agent simply will not engage. These findings map directly onto real-world human resource analytics, corporate promotion tracks, and the architecture of digital hiring platforms. Professional networks and job boards frequently engineer a visibility paradox into their UI. They display the exact number of applicants actively competing for a specific open role. Platform designers execute this feature under the flawed assumption of conformity and salience. They believe that displaying a high applicant count creates social proof, validates the role, and drives a sense of urgency. The actual consequence is aggressive strategic sorting. Displaying competitor volume forces the viewing agents to run a Bayesian update. The applicant pool skis immediately, driven entirely by the unobservable ability thresholds of the users interpreting that data. Engineering the visible competition level inadvertently filters the talent pipeline. Highly competent individuals evaluating a saturated pool will update their win probabilities downward and simply allocate their effort to more exploitable environments. Designing effective organizations depends on acknowledging this strategic reality. Success lies in building systems for rational actors who calculate their chances of winning based on the data provided, rather than impressionable groups following a social signal.